Hello everybody! Today I'm going to teach you how to make repurposed velvet organizational boxes. And these are just made from some old shoe boxes or any boxes you have lying around. This is a wonderful way to elevate your organizational boxes, to store items like your intimate items, your jewelry, and anything that you might keep in your bedroom dresser drawers. If you've heard of Marie Kondo, I'm a huge fan. And she encourages you to store things in a way that sparks joy for you. So I thought, why not take it to the next level and cover these little boxes that you always see her using in some stretch velvet and do a really cool DIY with it. And it's really simple, and it brings a lot of joy to see your pretty things displayed with all this pretty velvet and different colors on it. So the supplies you're going to need are shoe boxes in various sizes, a glue gun, some stretch velvet, chipboard, scissors, and a pen or pencil. So let's get started. So I have my supplies here, my basic shoebox, some chipboard, my velvet, scissors, glue gun, pen. There's links for all this below this video if you want more specifics. And the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to place our shoebox on top of our chipboard, and we're going to just trace it because we're going to make an insert to make the bottom look neat and tidy once we're done. And then you want to cut it out, but when you cut this out, I want you to cut it slightly inside the line that you traced, because we're going to be wrapping it with velvet and it's going to add some bulk to it. So it needs to be slightly inside the line so that there's that space for that fabric that's going to be going over it. So you have that, check to make sure it fits and there's just a little bit of wiggle room, and then set that aside. Go ahead and get your fabric now, your velvet. I like to use stretch velvet. It's very helpful to have the stretch. So anything with a fabric that's a stretch is going to be the best thing. You want to measure it to make sure that you have enough extra fabric to get it all the way inside the box. Make sure you can cover the edges very, very well. So once you've determined how much you're going to need based on the size of your box, go ahead and cut out a generous amount of fabric in a rectangle or square, whatever size your box is, and get that cut out here. That's what I'm doing here. I'm just cutting out. You can't see my hands very much because I'm cutting out some extra fabric. It's always better to go bigger on the fabric than smaller because you can always cut it off as you're working with it. Whereas if you don't have enough, then you won't be able to complete the project. So I'm just double checking. Yes, everything looks like it's going to work here. Now we're going to cut right at the corners. I want you to cut diagonal lines that go in right up to a little bit short of the edges of each box corner. And I want you to cut straight up on all four sides like that. This is going to make it a little bit easier to fold the fabric in as we start to glue it inside the box, because we're going to have the freedom that those slits are giving us as we're cutting. Okay, now I have my fabric cut out here, and I'm going to start folding it inwards. I'm kind of testing it before I add glue just to see how it's falling. You can see here I didn't cut a slit quite deep enough. It was fighting me a little bit, so I just added a little extra cut there. Then when you add your glue, I want you to add a generous amount of glue right in the corner and up along the inner side of the box that you're folding the fabric onto. And you're going to want to press this on, and you're going to want to hold it there for a few seconds and just keep pressing it to make sure that it grabs to that glue really well. You're going to notice then that you're going to have some extra fabric. A lot of this process is really just going to be working with the fabric as it falls into the box. So add your glue wherever the extra fabric is, cut off as much as you can. And when you go to do the opposite side, like I'm doing here, the opposite side of the one I just did, you want to stretch it so that it's remaining very tight. You don't want the fabric to be loose, so make sure you give it a good pull before you press it into the glue so that you have that nice tight stretched fabric look over the outside of the box. Obviously you don't want to stretch it so much that you end up mishaping your box, but you get the idea that you just want to make sure it's nice and tight around the box. So complete the first two sides, then go to the next two sides. Like I'm doing here, you can see I have a lot of extra fabric over on this side here, so before I even glue, I'm going to cut a little bit off to make it easier to work with. So just judge as you're working with your particular box how much extra fabric you need to cut off to make it easier to work with. And then always add a generous amount of glue to the bottom edge corner and up the side of the box, and then push your fabric in. I'm completing my last side over here, and I'm doing the same thing I just said, just adding a generous amount of glue, stretching the fabric over, and pushing down till dry, and hold it firmly till dry, and then you're just going to want to again cut off. You'll see those extra corners there potentially, depending on how your fabric falls, and go ahead and cut that off, and then you can always kind of roll it over the side edge there, make sure everything's lining up good, and add extra glue and push those into the corners just to make sure things are covered well. Go around, make any modifications you need to with making sure your glue is holding and that everything is pulled nice and tight with a firm stretch, and it's really tight over your box so that it looks nice and neat on the outside. So right now the bottom of the box looks really messy, but you can see that the rest of the box looks in good shape here. We got a nice tight stretch and it looks good. And now we're going to go back to finishing the bottom of the box. So I have my piece of chipboard that I cut out earlier at the beginning of this tutorial, and I'm going to get some more of the fabric. You can of course ideally match the fabric, or you can make different colored boxes and different colored bottoms if you want to, so you can get really creative with that. But I'm just going to place my rectangle for the bottom onto the fabric and cut out a piece around it. You want to cut it out to where there's about 1 inch or so on each side remaining, because we're going to glue it over this chipboard bottom. You're just going to add some glue along all the edges and gently fold it over. If you have a little too much fabric, then go ahead and trim it down, because we don't want to have too much extra bulk added, or it might misshape the box when we try and push it into the bottom. Fold your other 2 sides over and press till dry, and then you'll probably notice that there is some extra fabric on the corners there, and I'm going to address that in just a moment here. So with that little bit of extra, you can just trim it right off and it'll work just fine that way. You don't have to get too fancy about wrapping it any special way, just trim it down to the level of the chipboard. Finish gluing up this other side here. If you notice anywhere where the fabric is too loose, then just make sure you're adding extra glue so that everything is pulled nice and tightly and we don't have any fabric pulling away from our chipboard. Okay, so the last step is just to place it inside the bottom of your box, just like that, and it'll create a very finished look. You can glue the bottom down if you want to. I don't like to, because if I ever get anything messy in the bottom, I can pull it out and just remake a bottom instead of have to redo the whole box. That's how easy it is. I hope you enjoy these. I had a lot of fun teaching them. You can also repurpose the lids and make some jewelry display boxes, which I love to do too. So that's a really great way to do it. There's a lot of purpose for these, so have fun with it and be creative. I also like to mention I teach another slightly alternate version of how to wrap the box on my blog, and you can find the link to that below this video. So there's actually a couple different ways you can wrap the box, and I teach the other one in a blog post. So I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks so much, guys.